lifting up Jesus and opening His Word from Australia, Denmark, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Singapore, South Africa, United Kingdom, Thailand, the Philippines, United States, and throughout the world. You're watching Moriel TV.
Hi, this is Tim from Moriel TV and Moriel Radio, here live from Pittsburgh with James Jacob Prasch. Jacob, it's time for This Week in Prophecy.
I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at the Moriel USA base. Happy to be with you this week in prophecy, although it has been a very, very sad week. As we mentioned earlier in our daily broadcast, we'll be reviewing the terrorist attacks in Manchester and President Trump's visit to Israel and Saudi Arabia particularly, as well as to Europe at This Week in Prophecy. Let's continue. Manchester, England. As I predicted several days ago, the filth machine is doing exactly what I predicted the filth machine would do. The filth machine, that is the mainstream media, left-wing academia, and the mainstream political parties, are predictably scrambling to defend Islam and warn against Islamophobia. That was their reaction to 22 young girls being killed, the youngest at the age of 8, 59 injured thus far. The filth machine this week being driven by the mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, who states this man was not a Muslim but a terrorist. What an idiotic, moronic statement. He was not a Muslim. Despite the fact that 2/3 of British Muslims in an April 2016 comprehensive poll said they would not inform police if they knew of an Islamic terrorist attack in Great Britain, 2/3 said they would not tell the police. That's 2/3. All of a sudden he's saying we have to be careful about attributing any collective responsibility to an entire Islamic community of people or entire community of Islamic people. This is typical Britain following the Rotherham scandals in Britain, where you had Islamic gang attacks on British young girls, many of them underage, and you also had sexual trafficking of British women by Muslim organized crime gangs. But for fear of being charged with Islamophobia or racism, under political pressure, the British police and the local councils and social services did not want to speak out about what it was, although it was later exposed in the media, continuing to pander to, placate, and attempt to appease growing radical Islam, which believes it has the right to rape the daughters of the infidel and get away with it. And the media, the police, the social services will not say or do anything that will upset Islam, as if that's going to make it better. This simply reassures them and empowers them to continue the jihad. To them, in their mind, it shows them that their Allah is giving them victory. Yet the liberal idiocracy continues. Again, the mayor of Manchester, scrambling to defend against Islamophobia. That was his reaction. This man was not a Muslim. What was he? Was he a Quaker? Was he a Buddhist? Was he a Baptist? Was he a Shintoist? No, he was a Muslim, and he perpetrated this debauchery in the name of Islam. We're reminded that the Quran condemns the playing of musical instruments and young girls singing. That may explain the reason for the targeted attack on a concert. But now let's tell the story that's not being told. On the opposite side of the Atlantic, the idiocracy, that is the filth machine, was enshrined by the reaction of the Washington Post. The Washington Post says British officials are scrambling to find a motive. Scrambling to find a motive? The motive is jihad. The motive is established prima facie, but not according to the Washington Post, not according to the liberal idiocracy, not according to the filth machine. The filth machine was, of course, driven by George W. Bush after September 11th, when he began celebrating Ramadan in the White House to honor Islam after the Twin Towers came down. 3,000 Americans were killed and the Pentagon was attacked, and he put the Koran in the White House. Even though you cannot bring a New Testament into Saudi Arabia, he saw a need to honor Islam and to meet with officials of the CAIR, the Council of American Islamic Relations, 3 of whose officials were unindicted involved in raising money for Islamic terror. This was George W. Bush, another able driver of the filth machine. The mayor of Manchester, a driver of the filth machine. The Washington Post, a driver of the filth machine. People will get tired of this filth. And as we are warning, there will be a reaction that will be racist. Not against radical Islam or even against Islam, but against Asians, against Arabs. Working classes, particularly in Great Britain, are being driven to the extreme right. They're being driven to the British National Party. In reaction to what's being done in Germany by Angela Merkel, again licking the boots of people who rape German women, there is going to be an upsurge in neo-Nazism. In this country, we thank our liberal idiocracy judges, many of them appointed by Bush and by Obama. Judges who say the president cannot defend the borders, it's unconstitutional. Instead of these judges being removed, they say we have to put ourselves at risk of another San Bernardino or another Orlando attack or another Boston marathon bombing because we have to pander to the people trying to kill us. This, again, is the filth machine. And the filth machine involves CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, CNBC, etc. This is the filth machine. It is all filth. It is all lies. There is a spiritual battle on back of these things. Now let's tell the real truth. That is the factual truth about what's happening in the political sphere. Let's look at what's really transpiring spiritually. Again, Islam is a judgment on the Judeo-Christian world for having turned against God, His word, and His moral values. I feel nothing but compassion for the families of those young girls murdered in Manchester. Nothing but compassion for those families. Nothing. May the Lord comfort every one of those families and use this tragedy to draw them to a saving faith in Jesus. But let's tell the truth. The first point we already addressed earlier this week. Theresa May, at the behest of Barack Obama, voted against Israel and the UN to placate anti-Israel Islamic interests at the United Nothing. We warned when she did it that God's judgment would come on Britain because of her actions, and we warned that had Trump not been elected instead of Hillary Clinton, it would have seen God's judgment come on America. Not that God is causing it, but He is allowing it. Again, Obadiah 15. In the spiritual perspective of things, Theresa May has blood on her hands. She cursed Israel. I will bless them that bless thee, curse them that curse thee. And it is again the prayer of my heart that unless he repents, which is most unlikely, we will see the speedy judgment of Christ come on Barack Obama, that evil, evil instrument of Satan, who pushed for same-sex marriage, among his other crimes against America and against God. Well, let's understand that was only the beginning. Genesis 12, 1-3, Obadiah 15 is only the beginning. Theresa May opened the door for judgment to come on Britain. Not that God caused the terror, but He allowed it in judgment. You placate Islam, Islam comes after you. You pander to radical Islamists against Israel, you will reap the consequences of your actions from that same Islamist entity. That's what happened in Britain. Again, I have nothing but compassion for those families, but I realize why it happened. Second reason it happened. No one will tell you this either. In those theater attacks in Paris that were so terrible, you had an American heavy metal rock band that promoted satanic images, glorifying satanic-type rituals. Now, I'm not saying all heavy metal bands do that. Some do, some do not. But that one did. How is God going to protect people like that? You want to glorify Satan? You reap the consequences of what Satan does. Don't blame God. Blame Satan. Blame fundamentalist Islam and blame yourself. Again, I feel compassion for the innocent victims. Well, Ariana Grande, a promoter of lesbian, homosexual, and same-sex causes and images, promoting it among her fan base, which is young girls. No, God did not cause it. God did not do it, but God did allow it. How can he protect? Ariana Grande is despicable. She's morally debased. She's wicked. Unless she repents, she's going to hell. She's an agent of poison, putting spiritual, moral, and psychological toxins into the minds of the youth of America, Britain, and the Western world. This is what that pop singer is, and this is why God allowed it to happen at one of her events. They won't tell you that. Third, evangelical street preachers are harassed and arrested regularly in Manchester, as they are in Bristol and other British cities, but particularly Manchester. While radical Islamists are allowed to parade their wares and to declare their radicalism on the streets of Manchester, under political pressure, the police will only crack down on saved Christians because of the local Labour Party government. Again, this has nothing to do with party politics. Theresa May is a so-called Tory conservative. Not a real one, but that's her party. Muslims harass Christian preachers and the police come and arrest the Christians. This is Manchester, England. You touch the apple of God's eye. You touch Israel and the Jews, or you touch saved Christians, Abraham's other children. You touch Abraham's children after the flesh, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or you touch believers. You touch Abraham's descendants by birth, by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or you touch those who are his descendants by second birth, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You touch the apple of God's eye, and he comes after you. Did God cause it? No. Did God allow it in judgment? Yes. You want to protect radical Muslims who harass Christian gospel preachers? You want to arrest the Christian gospel preachers on the streets of Manchester to placate the Islamists? Well, now you reap what you sow, Manchester. I only feel sorry for the victims and their families. May God hold these crooked politicians responsible. We even predictably have the filth machine in clerical garb, Anglican clergymen, scrambling to defend Islam. What had been the second largest church in Manchester, an Anglican Church of England, is now the Islamic Center of Great Britain, where the bomber attended. It used to be an Anglican church, and Anglican clergy are scrambling to defend the British Islamic community. Even 2/3 of them stated in a comprehensive poll that they would not even inform police if they knew of an Islamic terrorist attack. But the mayor of Manchester will defend them. But the Church of England clergy will defend them. But the mainstream media will defend them. The reaction against these attacks, oh, we have to beware of Islamophobia. When 2/3 say they will not report a terrorist attack to the police, the Islamists, the radicals, so-called, are in control of Islam. And they don't call themselves radicals. They just say they're mainstream Muslims. They're in control. If you are not afraid of what has become of British Islam, you ought to be. You're out of your mind. If you don't believe the lies of the filth machine, they will say you're a homophobe and a bigot. How dare you not believe our lies? That's the BBC's mindset. That's the mindset of British universities. That's the mindset of British politicians. How dare you not believe our lies, even though your children are being murdered at concerts? How dare you not believe our lies? The real evil here, the real danger is Islamophobia. Again, may the Lord console those families who lost children. But don't think this is the end of it. And if these judges are not stopped in America by the hand of God, or at least by sensible people, what's going to prevent it from happening in America? But let us continue. Mr. Trump visited Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem, and then the Pope in Rome before going to a NATO summit in Brussels and then returning to Italy for I believe, a G7 economic summit. Saudi Arabia. He gave a speech that sounded impressive. You must drive out terror, he says. It impressed many people, including many evangelicals. He's getting rave reviews from certain conservatives and from a number of Christians. Now, let me say he's better than Barack Obama. Barack Obama's first trip to the Middle East, he didn't even visit Israel. He went on an apology tour to the Islamic capitals. That ridiculous, pathetic speech he gave in Cairo helped stir Islamic aggression, Islamist aggression. There are moderate Muslims. He's better than Obama. But he's only aggressively going after the symptoms. He's not attacking the disease. Now, if he had said to Saudi Arabia, what about your own human rights records arresting and flogging and killing Christians and capitally executing for people for becoming Christians under your Sharia, I would have been impressed. Why should we let you fund mosques and Islamic institutions in America and the West when you will not allow a New Testament to be brought into Saudi Arabia? If he went after the disease instead of the symptom, I would have been more favorably impressed. But he did not. If he said to Saudi Arabia, you need to stop funding the Council of American Islamic Relations. If he said to Saudi Arabia, you need to stop funding the export of Salafism, of Wahhabist mosques and madrasas and Islamic institutions that engender a belief in radicalism that results in support for jihad, that is terror, I would have been impressed, but he didn't. Instead of coming with the cure, he came with symptom management. Saudi Arabia is as much a threat as is Iran. The House of Saud is as much a cancer in the globe as the Iranian mullahs. Sunni, Shia, it doesn't matter. They're both demonic, satanic. They both persecute Christians. They both hate Jews. And they both support radicalism and either directly or indirectly what amounts to terror. He concluded big arms deals with the Saudi Arabians. I would have been more impressed if he grabbed $1 trillion in Saudi assets in America and said, we're applying this to our national debt because I'm releasing the 28 pages of your involvement in sponsoring Al-Qaeda that resulted in September 11th, when the Bush family was more interested in protecting the Saudis than they were Americans. The Bush administration. If he just grabbed their assets and made them pay for what they did, we wouldn't have to negotiate the arms deal. We could sell them the arms. but first give us our money that you owe us for funding Al-Qaeda and causing September 11th. Most of those hijackers were Saudi. The funding to Al-Qaeda came from the House of Saud, which is the Saudi government. But he wouldn't say that. Is it business as usual? I'm afraid it is. I support Mr. Trump's platform, but what he's doing, I don't support. He's like any other politician. He came to Washington as a non-politician, but he's behaving like one. Now, again, he's better than Obama. He's better than Obama, but so would Jack the Ripper be better than Obama. What you have is a predictable lesser of evils. He only went after the disease in terms of addressing its symptoms, not its causes. And he won't! The politics of oil dictates otherwise. He's trying to build a coalition against Iran. Maybe try to draw these people into making a peace treaty with Israel. That is the Sunni states, out of fear of Iran. Well, what happens once Iran goes? What happens if you get rid of Iran? Then what basis would there be for peace with Israel, or America, or the West? He will allow the human rights violations and the Christian rights violations to continue. No, he gave out Band-Aids and bandages, but he did not do anything other than try to tourniquet the bleeding. He did not suture. He did not cauterize. Let's go further with this week in prophecy. He comes to Israel and gives a good speech. Good images. Again, a lot better than Obama. He goes to the Wailing Wall. The symbolic gestures were positive. But as I doubted he would, he did not keep his campaign pledge promise to move the embassy to Jerusalem. He did not keep his word. Now look, all of this fake news and these artificial scandals being orchestrated by the left-wing media and the Democratic Party and the Republican Party establishment against him. We know that those things have little or no substance. They're politically motivated. Apart from the misdeeds of General Flynn, none of that stuff has any evidence to support any collusion with Russia or anyone else. It's just a political witch hunt. But Mr. Trump, don't expect the hand of God to be with you. I believe if you kept your word and moved the embassy to Jerusalem, God would have been in your corner. No, you are not as bad as your predecessor who betrayed America in effect to radical Islamic terror that is Iran. But you went halfway in Israel, the same as you went halfway in Saudi Arabia. You arrived in Rome and met with the Pope, who refused to meet with the families of children who were sexually victimized by Catholic priests when he was the Cardinal of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Again, I don't know what the purpose of that was, other than the Vatican's interest in co-brokering some kind of a Middle East peace. But let's look at the effects. American aid going to the Palestinian Authority is being used to give financial rewards to the families of suicide bombers. Why didn't you cut American aid to the Palestinian Authority? Why are we paying for that? Somebody puts a bomb on a school bus and they will name a soccer stadium after him. You're okay for first aid, but not for curing the disease. You will not go to the heart of the matter. You've not done so far. You've not kept your promises. Do I pray for you? Yes. Do I think you're better than Obama? Yes. Do I thank God that Hillary Clinton didn't get elected? Yes. Do I trust you? No. I never did. But if you go and Mr. Trump is sworn in as president in your place, that might be a good thing. I don't know. It's hard to believe he could be any worse than what you are doing, because you've not kept your word. Saudi Arabia is a wicked government. The Vatican is corrupt. The Palestinian Authority is as much a pro-terror organization as is Hamas. And as Obama took our money and gave it to Iran, in effect, when we froze their assets and he unfroze them, you take our money and give it to the Palestinian Authority, who gives financial inducements to the people to murder with Islamist terror. Why go after the symptom when you can wipe out the disease? You're never going to drain a swamp with a straw. So then you go to NATO. The countries of Western Europe got a free ride on the back of the American taxpayer and to a degree the British taxpayer during the Cold War. While the European and British left condemned Mrs. Thatcher and the American government, even Carter, who deployed the cruise missiles and the Jericho missiles in response to the Soviet deployment of the SS-20s aimed at European cities, escalating an arms race that the Soviet Union lost, and helping to bring about the financial collapse of the Soviet Union as a result when we undermined their commodity prices. If the European left had had their way, the Berlin Wall would still be standing. If the European left and the British left, the Committee for Nuclear Disarmament and Neil Kinnock and those crazy people had had their way, there'd still be 420 million people in Eastern Europe living under communist tyranny. But why should the American taxpayer have paid more to defend Europe than the European taxpayer? In this, you are completely right, Mr. Trump. It's time for these people to shell up and pay their own way. Europe is collapsing. They've got to make the iron stick to the clay, as Daniel predicted. That's what's happening this week in prophecy after Brexit. They're having to shore up economies like Greece and the so-called pigs. Portugal, Italy, Greece. Countries like Ireland, they're all in trouble. Spain. France is not that much better off, and either is Italy. They're in trouble. But somebody's got to pay. The insanity in Russia that may be helping setting the stage for a Gog and Magog scenario under Mr. Putin is thus. He's doing exactly what the old men in the Kremlin did that fomented the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact collapsed, the Soviet Union collapsed, then the CIS collapsed. Federation of Independent States. Only Russia itself is left. So what is he doing? Well, he's doing exactly what the Soviets did. Saber-rattling, building up a war machine with his oil and natural gas revenues instead of investing in the diversification of the Russian economy. As Russia spends more on weapons when nobody is threatening them other than Islam, which he's placating by getting in bed with Iran and arming them, Mr. Putin proposes a serious strategic threat to the Baltic states and to the Ukraine. He's already grabbed Crimea. And he is in bed with Iran. And the Russians are now arming Taliban to kill Americans in Afghanistan. Germany, France, Italy are a lot closer to Russia than America is. You are completely right, Mr. Trump. They must pay up. They must pay up. They cannot be talking about a powerful Europe, which is actually a very weak Europe, if they will not be responsible for their own defense costs. America can only protect people who are willing to protect themselves. We should no longer pick up the tab for Europe's defense. We should participate in it because it's in our interest, as it's in our interest to participate in Israel's defense. But Israel pays for most of its own. The Israeli taxpayer gives a higher percentage of their income to national defense than foreign aid helps them. America only gives them about $3.5 billion a year anyway. Not a lot. And Egypt gets as much. The mainstream media doesn't tell you that too often under the terms of Camp David. No, in this, Mr. Trump is correct. Had Mr. Trump said to the Saudi Arabians, we are going to drive the price of oil temporarily down so far that the Soviet Union's collapse will be replayed and we will turn Russia into the next Venezuela, that would make sense. Russia needs to be turned into the next Venezuela unless it gets rid of, deposes Putin. He's a dangerous man. He's steering Russia into a Gog and Magog scenario. If you believe there is a second battle of Gog and Magog in addition to the one at the end of the millennial reign of Christ. But he didn't do that in Saudi Arabia, as far as I am aware. No, it's just the politics of oil as usual. There's been cosmetic change, but not much change in substance in Mr. Trump's visit to the Middle East or to Europe thus far. Again, I pray for him. He's better than Obama. He's better than Bush, certainly better than Clinton. But he's not what we voted for. His platform was right, but he's not keeping his promises. Now again, I am not trying to lobby for any political party or cause. I'm simply looking at political events in light of biblical prophecy. Nothing has been done to stop the Islamist cancer because it springs as much from Saudi Arabia as it does Iran. Nothing has been done in terms of the Palestinian Authority. I must say this, however. Mr. Trump did not mention a Palestinian state. Credit to him for that. We are told, though, that Mr. McMaster's, his national security advisor, told the Israelis that the Wailing Wall was not on their turf. Mr. Trump responded by praying at the Wailing Wall and did make reference to Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Again, he's better than Obama, who knifed Israel in the back, as even Alan Dershowitz admitted. But he's not keeping his promises. It was this far, no further. It was a management of the symptoms, not a treatment or a cure of the disease. Please continue to pray for him and for Mr. Trump to do what he said he would do. Please also pray for Mr. Pence. I don't desire to see Mr. Trump impeached or forced out of office, but at this point, I'd rather have Mr. Pence than Mr. Trump. He's not doing what he said. You don't drain a swamp with a straw. You need a huge suction hose. Now, in my view, draining the swamp would necessitate abolition of the IRS and replacing it with something like a flat tax and only custom and excise. It would necessitate the abolition of the Federal Reserve System and replacing it with a Bank of the United States that was an agency of the federal government, where we would simply get rid of this unelected fourth branch of government that can wreak economic and political havoc. I don't think Mr. Trump is going to drain the swamp. I really don't think he's going to. I don't think he would be able to beyond a limited point because the Republican Party is as bad as the Democratic Party. You simply have more conservatives within it. But the Republican Party establishment, people like Mr. Ryan and Mr. McConnell and John McCain and Lindsey Graham and that Collins from Maine, these people are simply Democrats who sit on the opposite side of the aisle. They're no better than Hillary. No better. And no different. There are not enough real conservatives in the Republican Party to drain the swamp. I wish there were. I do not entirely blame Mr. Trump because he cannot do the impossible. But I do hold him accountable to keep his word where he can, and thus far he has not in many instances. In some instances, he has. In any event, that is the reality of his visit to the Middle East and Europe. And that is the reality of Manchester. Again, our prayers are for the families of those young girls who were killed and of the injured. I have nothing but compassion for them, but nothing but contempt for the Washington Post. We're trying to find the motive. Nothing but contempt for the mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham. We have to be careful against the dangers of Islamophobia. After 2/3 of British Muslims say they wouldn't even tell the police if they knew there was going to be an Islamic terrorist attack. Then they'll say that people who tell the truth are guilty of hate speech when they're guilty of de facto treason and unbelievable cowardice. These are the realities. That has been This Week in Prophecy. My name is Jacob Prasch. God bless and thank you.